Hey everyone, Elio here with another altered trading card gameplay video, this time playing Treyst and Rossum on Board Game Arena. My idea with this deck is to make use of permanent/landmarks to make sure that I always have value out of Treyst and Rossum's ability, or many of the things that also have synergy with Treyst and Rossum. One of the things that you're often trying to do is get permanents into the reserve zone so that you can play from there, or get any sort of cards in there with Ada Lovelace or Keelan Elemental. And one problem that can happen here is that if your opponent plays a decent amount of disruption, like sabotage or Baku effects to make you discard, then this strategy of putting cards into the reserve and trying to get them out can have you running really low on resources early on, even with Traced card advantage effect. So my thought is to play into Traced advantage, still trying to get him to 5 counters early on, but I want to put things in there often that don't lose value when played from reserve. Landmarks, whether they're played from your hand or reserve, end up with the same effect, so I'm pretty happy when they get put there with Keelan Elemental or with Ada Lovelace. Or, once I actually have a Traced ability online, if the fight is turning into a resource fight rather than one that is trying to win with power on the field, then putting cards like Landmarks into reserve are another way to make sure that I am not losing on resources versus some of the more slower attrition decks. That being said, this deck can play a very aggressive game. I have 8 1-drops between the Ysmir Stargazers, Axiom Salvagers, and 2 Foundry Mechanics, plus many other things that can be played for super cheap, and things that come into play for absolute free and give us value over the long term. For my uniques, I have a very cool Martingale, which is actually which plays into my strategy of 1-drops and helps make sure that I can play some of my more powerful effects multiple times. And I have 2 copies of Lyra Chronicler, both of which are pretty similar, and both of which, at first glance, seem like they're basically worse than the rare version of the card. Often, they really are. But one of the things about uniques is that if you don't have great uniques, sometimes you can use ones that are meant to fill essential effects in your deck. In this case, the resupply ability of Lyra Chronicler, which is what I really want, giving me rare slots elsewhere in my deck so I can have the power that I need while still getting the effects that my deck requires. There's definitely stronger uniques that could fill these slots, but this will do for now. I only have 2 Frankenstein. I would love 3, but I just don't own the third. A one-off rare Hooked is a card that I absolutely love, though it's kind of controversial. I think of it as a magical training that also can win lanes. In this deck, I do wish that it was another strong permanent, but right now the core set just doesn't have something that fits exactly what I want to fill this slot for a cheap effect. And so this is one of the ways that I'm going to try to make sure that I have resources in more attrition-y matchups and be able to play into my strategy of aggression by giving me a cheap effect that can win lanes. A one-off of Boom works well with my Armored Jammers and also gives me a removal effect for any big things that I just need to deal with, which are not super common, but sometimes you really need this. I am only running 2 Jammers. One thing that I'm wary of is that Jammer, while a very cool card, doesn't contribute to the board at all. And so having the full 3 copies I'm a little wary of right now. And I want to have some of my sabotage value in things like Tinkerbell that will contribute to a lane when I play them. Keelan Cylinder falls into a similar spot, but at least can give me power into a lane that can help me push something over the top. And overall, I do want a suite of at least 7 cheap permanents so that I can easily play them with things like Ada Lovelace, and so that I can overflow them so I can trigger things like Armored Jammer. Boom also works well with a Jammer, but in a pinch, I can use Boom with something cheap, like a Foundry Mechanic or a Using Your Stargazer. That's the deck. We're going to jump into some replays of some games that'll walk through my thought process, and we can see how it actually plays out. Okay, starting off against Sigmar. I've got an opening hand. I don't love keeping necessarily a Jammer early on versus Sigmar. One thing that they can do as a turn 1 play is just play an Ortis Carrier, and then I'm stuck with something in hand that not only can it not sabotage, but it's not going to put any power on the board. Keelan Burst, I could definitely keep. For that same carrier reason, it can be strong. However, here, with the ability to Keelan Elemental Capella into play, getting a counter on the Treyst, plus having a follow-up play with Stargazer, I think I want to keep this kind of trio of cards to allow me to have that strong start with an early possibility of Treyst going off, rather than having some counterplay to what he's going to be doing or potentially doing with an Ortis Carrier. As said, we want to start off with this kind of aggressive play of doing the Keelan Elemental with Capellia. We go to the right lane here because if he's going to play some sort of 2-drop that, let's say is a 2/2/2, then I want him to try to play it to the right and us both advance, and then me be able to drop a surprise Stargazer on the left side to try to beat the recruit. Ultimately, though, he does play this 1/3/1, which means that we can't advance on left. I decide not to play out my Stargazer. All it would do would give me earlier Treyst value, but that's not necessarily what I'm trying to do quite yet, so much that I'm going to give up value from my hand. We draw 2 Frankensteins and a Stargazer. We can't really afford both of these, so we're going to get rid of one of the Frankensteins. Opponent goes ahead and plays the Gatekeeper on left. We could play Stargazer and Keelan Elemental and take the left lane, but we'll let him advance while continuing to advance ourselves, and this will at least let us spend our mana efficiently, basically at the cost of him having one more advance. The Frankenstein's really bad in our hand, and it takes a long time for us to be able to get to the point when we're going to be able to get it into reserve, unless we get another Keelan Elemental. So doing this while I still can felt like it was worth doing to give me higher value plays in the future. We get rid of the Keelan Burst versus the Boom. You could argue for either of them. Ultimately, because I did just let him advance there, I want to be cautious of some sort of Grand Endeavor plays down the line. Since if I'm going to let him get movement, I don't want him to get to a point when he gets inevitability. So we'll keep the Boom as a result of that line of thinking. Now we have a lot of different choices available to us. Given we're currently fighting for Mountain over here, I'm going to play the Keelan Elemental as it's a relatively cheap choice over here, and I want him to contribute something in order to beat me on the forest. Right now this will tie it up. I could have Frankensteined over there, but I'd also, if possible, like to save that until I know that it's going to give me longer value. Him developing a Ortis Bastion will be a potential good target for my Boom later on. Right now, because he's tapped out, I feel vindicated that I didn't play the Frankenstein, as I'm just going to play the Stargazer here to win both lanes, bringing us up to this just 2 points away from victory, and we still have this 3/3 in our discard pile. We are pretty afraid, though, with the Bastion coming out. He's going to be able to have a lot of power on the board as a result of that. Here we'll get rid of the Keelan Burst. We don't need 2 removal spells, particularly one that can't hit the Bastion. He opens up with a unique Amelia Earhart, and this, whenever another non-token character joins his expeditions, he gets another recruit in this expedition, so this lane is lost. There's no way that I can win this. No matter what he's going to play here, he's going to get more 2/2s in this lane while developing this side of the board. With that, I'll play the Frankenstein on the right to start getting power out there. I play this first just to dodge any sort of Ortis Troopers. He doesn't play a Trooper. Instead, he plays a rare Foundry Mechanic out of faction. We'll continue to contest this. He does, though, drop Ozma, getting him more resources. Doesn't seem like he's going to be running out anytime soon. But because we have been playing everything to the right, we do get to finish off with a Salvator, which will at least win this lane this turn, put us 1 away. And he advances on left. That being said, with the Amelia Earhart coming in, some cheap things over here, and the Bastion in play, we are definitely a long ways from being able to say that we've decisively won this game. Here, I am in an interesting spot. I do kind of feel like I'm likely to lose both lanes this turn with this Amelia Earhart in play. He's going to be able to play this out and develop both sides of the board with the Bastion super strongly. So I'm going to keep developing my mana. I do want to get rid of something. I think Bastion's going to give me the longest, the best play into the final turns. as we're giving me a resupply and give me more power. And I am going to need to boom this turn to get rid of this Bastion before we go into the next turn. And I can do that with just my 1/1/1 in the Salvager. So I'll get rid of the Stargazer, put that in the discard, and my plan this turn is going to be to resupply with both my 2 things for 4 mana, and for my final 3 mana, boom the Ortis Bastion, and hopefully set up much better for the next turn. As thought, he plays the Amelia Earhart out, and we're not in a position where we're going to be able to be winning this turn. Our Bastion did hit a rare Axiom Salvager. We developed that rather than the common one, which it may have been a mistake. But the other thing to think is that water on the common one may end up being effective, since both the lanes that we are going to be fighting over care about water. Regardless, we activate our Rossum and try to use it just to keep card advantage rather than putting the Ada in. So we put the boom there that we know we're going to be casting and get rid of the monolith as a result. Opponent does pass, so as said, they win both lanes this time. They have lots of cards in hand and lots of mana, so I don't think I was going to run them out of resources. I just need to play smart in terms of how we're going to be effective with our mana. Here, I'm going to get rid of the Lovelace's mana. I don't really need both, and I do want to keep developing. I want to hold on to my Treyst ability, or my ability to put Capella in, because I'm not sure yet at this point if I'm going to need it to be cast from hand to try to prevent him from winning left side this turn, or if I can afford to play it for free. Given that he isn't developing on the left side yet, though, I'm going to go ahead and get that Lovelace down, and just develop my other Capella, and now I know more information in terms of what's going to be at my disposal for winning this round. With him dropping Anubis on right, we're going to lose something to the left lane, but we're automatically winning the left lane. But there's no way we're going to stop this 7 green on the right or get to our 7 water that we would need. So we'll sacrifice something here. We will play the Lovelace out, though. That lets us develop the Capella for next turn. So we can go into the tiebreaker already with a good amount of power on the board. The hooked right now is going to be useless in tiebreaker. So it makes sense to use this to draw a card and use my mana now to have more resources in terms of cards and choices next turn. Now, with only 1 effective lane in play, choices become a good deal simpler since we're not trying to necessarily win 1 lane. We just want to sequence our things and choose our place to give us the best opportunity to get as much power in 2 different colors as possible. I kind of like my prospect of being able to play Keelon Elemental from hand, put one of these into reserve, use Treyst to put the other into reserve, and play all of them with the Bastion ability plus a Foundry mechanic to get all the power I need. So I choose not to mana as a result of that. We start with the Foundry mechanic so that if you play some Anubis, we have our lowest power thing available to sacrifice. The Salvager doesn't change our thinking too much, so we can just continue to play out with that initial plan and hope that overall that we're going to have the power that we need. With us having the Haven in play and with us having gotten rid of his Bastion, we're set up a lot more effectively than he was. The first charge, though, coming out is very terrifying. This is giving him 5/5/5 in power, and if he has another one, we're in a lot of trouble. We play out our last unit, which gives us just enough to be eking out over brown. We're really killing in blue, but if he has the ability to charge, we lose. If he doesn't, I think the best that he can really do would be to tie it up again, in which case I feel okay going into the final round, but certainly wary. Luckily, though, he does not have a 2-mana play, and we take the game in a very close tiebreaker. Okay, now we're up against Atasia. We do have a similar Keelan Elemental Capelia combo in our hand, where we could also um, maybe get some additional plays with the Cylinder out. But we also have one of the strongest cards in the game right now in Haven, and we have 2 copies of them. Against Tasia, they don't have cards that they can use to remove this that they love playing early, unless they use a rare Cloth Cocoon, and even then it's a pretty decent trade with us having Resupply. They also don't have a lot of Sabotage to get rid of things from our yard unless they're playing Axiom Scrambler. So Lovelace gives us a way that we can do early play and get out a card draw from putting one of these havens into our hand. So we will keep the Lovelace on top of that to make sure that we continue drawing cards. With that and all the resupply, it gives us some good early plays. He plays that Spindle. We can use this turn to get Ada Lovelace into the reserve while also winning a lane. Knowing that he has this Spindle, we'll be pretty shy with keeping a lot of our removal, though some of it still may be effective if you get something big enough that using a Keylon burst on something anchored would be worth spending the 5 mana. We get rid of Lovelace there. Not sure if I'm super happy about that move in hindsight. Hooks can be used on our own things to move things lanes, but it can't be moved on his things, so it's not as useful. And we already do have some card draw here, but we do get rid of the Lovelace. We can open up with a Haven. That way we make our Ada Lovelace bigger. And the second Lovelace will be what we'll use to actually draw a card with the first Haven. He builds out on right, we'll build out on left, and do our plan from the very beginning. He does now have this Muna Druid and a Muna Caretaker, so he can have lots of anchoring ability in his discard pile. Given that, the kind of thing what I was talking about earlier of potentially being happy with using a Keylon Burst to remove something big and anchored is seeming more realistic. So going into this next turn, more likely to get rid of the hooked depending on what we draw, and keep this Keylon Burst as something that we can use to remove something big, powerful, and anchored. So we do get rid of that hooked and wait for our opponent's first play. They play an Inari, which is really good with the anchoring. That being said, I don't really want to spend all my mana destroying it this turn, still giving him the ability to play out things and win lanes. So I think that I just have to, accept the fact that he's going to get some card draw, and I'll go ahead and play out my Haven to see what my options are, and to build out my own power. He develops everything onto the left, trying to force that lane. So we ourselves can play out the Lyra Chronicler. The intention here is that we'll be able to use the resupply effect next turn, and hopefully get to the point when we're starting to activate the ability here. We do have to discard the Capelia, but we're not super excited about playing that anyway. Get rid of the Ymir Stargazer here. Keylon Elemental will get things into our discard, our reserves, specifically the Amelia, so we're definitely going to be activating Treyst this turn. He's getting lots of value with the Inari. We'll open up with Frankenstein on the right. We're happy trading 1-for-1 with lanes for a bit, and this will let us see what our draw is here. Boom is really interesting. It may be useful in something like a Hydra Cannulator. Now that he anchors the Inari, and we're out of the cost range to be able to impact that, we'll go ahead and resupply with the Chronicler. We hit a Haven, which will play this turn for some value, since we know that we're going to be able to get things into the reserve with Treyst. And we actually hit a Keylon Elemental, which is going to be pretty big. It's actually large enough that we're threatening to advance on left while we're also advancing on right, unless he plays something further. We go ahead and draw to see what we get, but we'll play the Amelia there. But But we'll play this out to force him to play something else, we're going to advance on both lanes while he's only advancing on one. I almost missed calling out this really sick Moon of Caregiver. Not only does it draw a card for just 2 mana, but when it comes back from the other side, if he's not using it to give Anchored, it's going to give 2 boosts to a plant, which is really just great value. I misspoke on what was advancing there, or misread the tumults, actually. It wasn't that I was advancing and him as well. It was more that I was actually blocking him from advancing. So we mutually stopped each other, which in this situation I think is not as good as me advancing, because I'm a little wary of him getting to the point when he can drop some big anchoring things. I'm not loving having to play a turn booming something to get rid of it with this spindle out. But at least we are getting further on the board than he is. We discard the Keylon Elemental here because we kind of see this cylinder as boom fuel. And with him anchoring that, we now feel like we have a good target that we can actually use with the Keylon Burst early on. Hitting Jammer gives us something that we can immediately impact his reserve with. And we'll also overflow and get rid of at least the Yangsu. And we'll probably spend this turn going ahead and getting rid of the Inari. Using the boom was definitely a mistake there, though, as the Jammer doesn't get rid of anything immediately. We should have used the Keylon Burst, which would have had the same effect, and our landmark would have gotten something after the fact. So we'll see if this effect ends up costing us in the game, because it was definitely a suboptimal play. Now with the boom gone, we can get rid of the cylinder since we definitely don't need that anymore. And we can look to get some Tinkerbell to get more sabotage here developed with the Treyst. We also see a Jammer, which means that we can now kind of rely on that for our sabotaging. So we'll throw Frankenstein down instead, get a lot of power on the board, and try to force an advance on the left. Especially since we know that we'll sabotage at least one thing this turn with the Jammer, or at the very least, it's an opportunity that we have to us. With him dropping the Hydra on the right, we definitely want to try to win that lane this turn. We already used our boom we in the misplay earlier, so we need to try to take the advantage while we can, because in the follow-up rounds, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do to deal with this Hydrocana. So again, we build out here to win on both lanes, and we can throw the Jammer out to get rid of both things in his discard pile with the end of turn sabotage effect coming into play. Now we're only one lane away from winning. We're basically never going to win the right side again, but all we have to do is force in on left. Here, we can definitely get rid of a Keylon Burst. There's no way we need 2 of these with them costing 5 mana. We want everything that can give us blue on the left side as possible. We're definitely going to be doing an early Treyst to see what kind of value that we have. But we'll first open up just to be immune to our own opponent's sabotage in case they just didn't play it out early. Getting the Chronicler out for 6 blue. Which already is going to be really hard for green to beat, which can sometimes be lacking in blue with things like Spindle and Caregiver not actually giving any blue value. He is playing these out, which feels more like stall plays depending, so we'll see what his longer-term game plan is, but it may also just be the case that he doesn't have what he needs. On our side, we'll play the Foundry mechanic first, kind of matching his stall value to see what he's doing, and he does play a unique Kakoba Legion Commander. When played from reserve, this can put things to sleep, multiple things to sleep, but when played from hand, it's only going to give some power and give some boost. A very, very cool unique, but unfortunately it's a little late in the game for it to be able to get its killer effects, which are the sleep ones. And here it's just going to be giving a little bit of value, which seems like it's going to be too little too late. Us getting the Ada there lets us also get a Tinkerbell or Capelia in the yard. We're winning by so much, though, that it doesn't really matter what we do here, and we're going to get the Tinkerbell played from hand when we need it. So opponent finishes out with probably the biggest you could play for the mana that he had, but even that is not enough. And we take over and close out the game. Okay, playing against a Fen and Crowbar deck. This time we're seeing 3 Keelan Bursts in our opening hand. I don't really love these versus Fen. I like having these, versus maybe Muna, potentially versus Ordis for Ordis Carrier, depending on what else is in my hand. And maybe versus something that I'm like a little wary of, Haven Bravos Bastion, but I don't love having to make that trade. I'd like to do something else early. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all 3 of these for my mana early on, and if I do see my boom later on, I'll probably try to hold on to it just so that I have something in case there's anything surprising coming up that I need to deal with. Opponent opens up with a rare Bravos Pathfinder. It's a very cool one. It's unfortunately, I think, not super exciting for him as an opening play, but you play with the cards that you're dealt. When played from reserve, it may end up being a scary effect, though. On our side, we can go ahead and develop the Haven, see what it gets us. And then we now have the choice of which thing that we want to play on the right side. We have 3 different 1-drops. I like playing the one that will let us resupply next turn, even though the Foundry mechanic it has worse stats, and so it's a little bit more value to do this now. Keeping the Foundry mechanic here, though, also gives me potential play of using it for its support ability, getting me to Treyst ability sooner rather than later. Rewinding real quick here, I think this is a really interesting hand choice. I have Jammer, Hooked, and Martingale. Hooked, I actually feel like is at its strongest versus pink, since there's so many asymmetrical colors. You can often get them to do something where, maybe they play a Mighty Djinn or a Hatter to a mountain lane like this, and then you can hook it over to the water side. That, in combination with its ability to draw cards, makes me really want it. The Jammer, also, with them always having things in the reserve due to Fen's ability, is pretty effective at disrupting the things that you really want to get rid of. That being said, the Martingale is also unique and fairly strong, and I'm a little worried of just running into like a track of spells and not having things to play here. So I end up getting rid of the Jammer to make sure that I have characters to play in the long term. But it's a tough choice, and I could see any one of these 3 being the correct one to actually do. Opponent does get a Mighty Djinn out, which I expect that they're going to be manning this turn. I'll go ahead and see what I get with my resupply. And I see a Frankenstein, which is pretty cool because it'll let me actually match on the right, preventing him from advancing, while also resupplying and refilling itself. We do see another Frankenstein from our side, which is cool because it's a 4/4 for 4 or 4/4/4 that resupplies, which is just very strong and can be hard for him to keep up with. But now he's definitely ahead on mana. We get rid of a Lovelace because we don't have any permanents in hand, and we do draw the boom. As said earlier, we got rid of these Keelan Bursts, and this is really our only thing of removal. So like if he gets a Hydra out, which he's 1 turn away from, not that the Keelan Burst could have hit that, but this is pretty critical. This does make us a little sad that we got rid of the Jammer, but we have other cheap things that we can get rid of, so we'll see if we have the opportunity for those. A Tanuki from him is going to hit our Frankenstein, so we can only get so much power and advantage from what we have. We'll go ahead and develop into the blue while we can. If he wants to throw out this Bravos Pathfinder here, we're not super upset about it because he wouldn't get any value from it. He does Cloth Cocoon our Haven, though, which is sad for sure. We play the Martingale out so that we can get into the discard pile and have something there that is going to give us the ability to start tracing next turn. But we can also hook this turn to prevent him from advancing on the right while we still advance on the left, which again is what's so cool about Hooked in this matchup. So now he's 3 points behind, and we do find another jammer, which we can maybe use to our advantage. One of the things about playing against Fen and Crowbar is that early on, its ability is a large amount of card advantage, basically giving you an extra resupply worth of cards. But eventually you get to the point when you wouldn't want to mana things anyway, and so rather than just having 2 cards in hand, one of those cards is basically going to a useless mana slot, and the other going to and reserve. So you're down half a card at that point. With him being at 7 mana, we're almost at that point. And I'm at the point when I can actually kind of do resource advantage things to take the game the long pull. So unless he is able to do something to stop me, or to both stop me and rapidly advance the next few turns, I feel pretty good from this position. He gets another unique. This one gives him lots of resupply value. And I'm pretty happy that I have the jammer now, which I go ahead and drop out to get rid of this awesome Esmeralda. He then follows up with an Aether Shard, which, talking about the resource advantage game before, would completely flip the script. If this stays in play, we would, rather than being favorites in the resource advantage in the long term, would now be heavily disadvantaged, and the tide would start turning to him. Luckily, we did keep this boom from earlier, and we have really just a brutally sick sequence of plays to be able to sabotage 2 of his uniques and get rid of one of his 5 mana rare drops. That would have been pretty devastating for us. He's got 2 mana with which to play something now, which means he's probably only going to be able to put something on 1 lane, and we're going to advance at least 1 spot here with either the Capellia or the Martingale. I do play the Capellia so that I can start getting Treyst on board, and I can put the Capellia into play for the next turn, being in this lane here. And as said, at this point, we're pretty low on resources, so the things that we've done to be able to draw cards from Hooked and things like that are coming in clutch, because otherwise we'd be pretty low. We can get rid of the cylinder here. We're still trying to get mana out to get to a sweet spot, and with the resupply here plus the hook here, we have more cards at our disposal than it may appear. He himself has a full deck of things in the reserve, including this Anansi that is going to be pretty big, 4 power. With it coming in off the reserve, he's going to be able to keep it anchored. He can put something to sleep. He can give some of our things fleeting to make us lose value there. So we'll start out with the Treyst. We see Keelan Elemental, which is interesting. But we'll go ahead and do the Capellia, putting it to sleep on the right side this time. Just in case he does a sleep effect on the other Capellia. We don't want them both in the same lane. We want them split up. He plays the Anansi left, and we'll go ahead and play to advance on the right side, and get the Salvager in our yard, just so that we can get some resupply effects here, as well as maybe play it out to the right to win Mountain in case he does something else. He does sleep us on the left side, so that is what that is. But we'll play a card, resupply, and we have the Hooked in case we need that to give us any sort of value. With him seeing the Tinkerbell, he does give our Keelan Elemental fleeting, rather than have it fall victim to this. But we can go ahead and Hooked our Capellia here to actually intentionally have both of our things in the lane that Anansi is not on next turn. So we'll win this lane with our 4 power, and next turn we're going to be starting with 4 power on board, and him pretty low on resources in terms of what he can do to affect that. Drawing Haven on top of that is also just a brutal follow-up play for us, which lets us perfectly spend our mana, hitting another Haven, and with this sequence of plays, he's pretty much just out of options. in terms of paths for him to be able to take the victory. We have the card advantage now, and we can play our Tinkerbell to get rid of his another very cool unique. And his ability to stop our already 6 green power over here is going to be tough. Even with Tanuki giving 3 power and getting rid of one of our things, and most of our things not being big and green. The Haven, combined with this Keelan Elemental, putting things in there, we're just going to have an insurmountable amount of green over here, despite him having the basically the highest power green stuff that he could possibly have from what was in his hand. And yeah, that's the game. And another decisive victory. Okay, that was the deck and the games. I think it played pretty well. I do plan on bringing this to some in-person weekly events soon, so we'll see how it plays in real life. Let me know if you like this format of playing, replay games, or if you like seeing live games, and open to any feedback, or tell me what you want to see or see me play in the comments. Consider subscribing if you like watching. Lets me know that it's worthwhile making these videos. And yeah, thank you again for watching.